There's a story that needs telling, about a man who had everything, lost it all to the demons in his mind, and then, well, then he did something remarkable. The year was 2004, and Robert Downey Jr. was lying in a Burger King parking lot, surrounded by drugs, his mind racing with anxiety so fierce it could tear a lesser man apart. That moment, that rock bottom, would become the cornerstone of one of Hollywood's greatest comebacks. You see, anxiety isn't just about feeling nervous. It's a beast that can consume your soul if you let it. But what if I told you that the same man who once couldn't get insured for a movie role would go on to anchor a $22 billion franchise? What if I told you he discovered 10 powerful ways to tame that beast, techniques so effective they could change your life starting today? Welcome to Rise Stoically, where ancient wisdom meets modern warriors. Now, I've seen my fair share of self-help nonsense in my time, but what we're about to explore isn't some feel-good mumbo-jumbo. These are battle-tested strategies, forged in the fires of real struggle and tempered by the wisdom of the ages. If you're fighting anxiety right now, if you feel like your mind's running a marathon while your body's stuck in quicksand, then lean in close, because what you're about to learn isn't just theory. It's the same practical wisdom that helped turn a man who was considered unhireable into Iron Man himself. And if it worked for him, well, stick around and let's see what it can do for you. What we're about to dive into isn't just another list of breathing exercises or meditation apps. No, what I'm about to share with you runs deeper than that. You see, when Robert Downey Jr. faced his demons, he didn't just find temporary fixes, he discovered timeless principles, the same ones that ancient Stoics used to face emperors and exile without breaking a sweat. In the next few minutes, you'll learn exactly how to implement these 10 powerful strategies. We'll break down each one, show you how RDJ used them to rebuild his life, and more importantly, how you can use them to quiet that storm in your mind. From the observer technique that saved him during his darkest hours to the Iron Will morning protocol that keeps him centered even now. And here's the kicker. You won't need any fancy equipment or years of therapy. These are tools you can start using the moment this video ends. So, let's begin with something that might just change your life today. The first way to conquer your anxiety comes from a moment in Robert Downey Jr.'s life that most folks don't know about. Picture this. A man sitting alone in a rehabilitation center, his mind racing faster than a Mustang in an open field. His thoughts were like a tornado, tearing through every attempt at peace. But right there, in that moment of chaos, he discovered something powerful. The observer technique, he'd later call it, though it wasn't anything fancy or complicated, just a simple truth that changed everything. You see, most people trying to fight anxiety are like someone trying to punch the wind. But Robert, he learned to watch his thoughts instead of wrestling with them. Just like those old Stoic philosophers used to say, the first rule of peace is to watch the parade of your thoughts pass by without joining it. When anxiety would hit him during those early comeback auditions, he'd step back in his mind, like he was watching himself in one of his own movies. He wasn't the character consumed by fear anymore. He was the audience, watching it all unfold. I remember him telling this story about his first day back on a major film set. The anxiety was crushing, like an invisible weight on his chest. Instead of letting it overwhelm him, he did something different. He became the observer of his own experience. Here comes the "what if I mess this up" thought, he'd note to himself. There goes the "they'll never trust me again" worry. Just naming them, watching them pass like clouds in the sky. And you know what? Those thoughts lost their power just like a bully who's been calmly stared down. The second way emerged from the ashes of his darkest mornings. The Iron Will protocol isn't just some fancy name for a morning routine. It's a battle plan, forged in the fires of necessity. Every morning, before the sun even thinks about rising, Robert would make his first victory of the day. Feet hitting the floor at the same time every single day. No negotiations, no excuses. The ancient Stoics had a saying about this very thing. The morning hour has gold in its mouth. But here's where most folks get it wrong. They think it's about doing more, adding more, being more. Robert discovered it's about the opposite. It's about creating space, about silence. 20 minutes of pure, undisturbed quiet. Not meditation, not prayer, just silence. letting your mind settle like dust in an old room. He says this single practice cut his anxiety in half, not because it's magical, but because it's fundamental. Like building a house from the foundation up, not trying to fix the roof while the walls are shaking. The third way came to him during a particularly rough patch, when the weight of rebuilding his career seemed almost too heavy to bear. The sphere of control, he named it, though it wasn't his invention. An ancient Stoic philosopher, a former slave named Epictetus, had figured this out centuries ago. The principle is simple, but it'll shake your world if you really grab hold of it. Picture a circle inside another circle, inside yet another circle. The innermost circle. That's what you can control completely. Your breathing, your responses, your actions. The middle circle is what you can influence, but not control. Other people's opinions, opportunities, relationships. The outer circle, that's everything else. The weather, the economy, the past. Robert realized he was spending most of his energy trying to control things in that outer circle, and it was driving his anxiety through the roof. So he made a radical shift, started putting 80% of his focus on that inner circle, complete control. When reporters would ask about his past, he'd focus on what he could control, his response, his honesty, his commitment to moving forward. When anxiety about future roles would creep in, he'd redirect his energy to what was in his power, staying sober, showing up prepared, being professional. The fourth way came to Robert during a moment that would have broken most men. He calls it the Stoic time machine, though there's nothing complicated about the machinery of it. It's about perspective, about seeing your current struggle from the vantage point of tomorrow. You see, when he was preparing for his Iron Man audition, the anxiety was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But instead of letting it paralyze him, he did something remarkable. He projected himself forward in time, past the audition, past the outcome, to a point where he was still standing, still sober, still moving forward regardless of what happened. The ancient Stoics called this premeditation of evils, but Robert made it into something more powerful. He turned it into a tool for transcending the present moment's anxiety by already accepting and moving past whatever outcome lay ahead. The fifth way emerged from what Robert calls his darkest hour, though he'll tell you now it was actually the beginning of his brightest day. The gratitude alchemy, he named it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Gratitude? That's nothing new. But hold on, because this isn't your garden variety count your blessings practice. This is about transforming the very thing that's causing your anxiety into a reason for gratitude. When the anxiety about his career was at its peak, when he couldn't get insured for films and every door seemed closed, he started doing something that seemed crazy at the time. He began thanking his anxiety. Yes, you heard that right. He'd say, "Thank you for showing me what I care about. Thank you for showing me where I need to grow." Like an alchemist turning lead into gold, he transformed his greatest enemy into his most honest teacher. The sixth way comes from understanding something most folks never realize about anxiety. Robert calls it the energy audit, and it's based on a simple truth that took him years to understand. You see, anxiety isn't just a feeling, it's energy, pure and simple. And energy can't be destroyed, but it sure as hell can be redirected. During his comeback, he noticed something interesting. On days when his anxiety was through the roof, he actually performed better if he channeled that energy instead of trying to calm it down. He developed a practice that would make those old Stoics proud. Instead of trying to get rid of the anxiety before a big scene or meeting, he'd ask himself, how can I use this energy? That nervous stomach became fuel for intensity in dramatic scenes, racing thoughts, transformed into quick-fire wit in interviews, the shaking hands redirected into passionate gestures that became part of his signature style. The seventh way is what Robert considers his secret weapon, though he's happy to share it with anyone who'll listen. The victory journal, he calls it, and it's not what you might expect. This isn't about writing down your successes, it's about redefining what victory means entirely. Every night, without fail, he writes down 3 things: a battle he faced, how he faced it, and what he learned from it. Win or lose doesn't matter. What matters is showing up for the fight. This practice comes straight from the Stoic playbook, though they never had a name for it. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations in a similar way, reflecting on each day's challenges and his responses to them. Robert took this ancient practice and turned it into a modern tool for anxiety management. You see, he once said in an interview, anxiety tries to tell you that you're not winning unless everything goes perfectly. This journal teaches you that you're winning every time you stay in the ring, regardless of the outcome. The eighth way came to Robert in a moment that would have sent most folks running for the hills. The Stoic pause, as he calls it, though it's more like a complete reset of your internal compass. It happened during his first major press tour after getting clean. The questions were coming fast and hard, each one designed to make him crack, each one pulling at old wounds that hadn't quite healed. That's when he remembered something he'd read about the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, how this powerful man would pause before responding to anything, taking what he called the space between stimulus and response. Robert took this ancient wisdom and turned it into a modern-day superpower. Between every question, every challenge, every spike of anxiety, he'd take this pause. Not just a breath, mind you, but a complete mental reset. He developed what he calls the 3-count reset. On 1, acknowledge the trigger. On 2, feel your feet on the ground. On 3, choose your response. Simple? Yes. Easy? Not always. But it saved him from more anxiety spirals than he can count. In that pause, he says, lies all the power in the world. It's the difference between being a reactor and an actor in your own life story. The 9th way emerged from what Robert considers his phoenix moment. That point when he realized his anxiety wasn't just something to manage, but something to transform. The Phoenix Protocol, he named it, and it's about as far from your standard anxiety management as you can get. This isn't about calming down, it's about rising up. You see, most folks try to shrink when anxiety hits. They get smaller, quieter, more contained. Robert discovered that the real power lies in doing the exact opposite. When anxiety rises, you rise higher. It's based on an old Stoic principle. The obstacle is the way. When his anxiety would spike before a big scene, instead of retreating to his trailer, he'd walk straight onto the set. Instead of hiding from interviews, he'd request more. He turned his anxiety into his announcement that something important was about to happen. Anxiety, he often says, is just energy waiting to be redirected. It's your body's way of preparing you for greatness, if you're willing to see it that way. He developed a system of using anxiety as a signal to expand rather than contract. Feel that tightness in your chest? Time to stand taller. Racing thoughts? Time to speak more deliberately. Shaky hands? Time to take on something that requires steady focus. And finally, we come to the 10th way, what Robert considers the cornerstone of not just managing anxiety, but transforming your entire relationship with it. The legacy mindset, though that name barely scratches the surface of what this practice really means. This isn't about what you'll leave behind when you're gone, it's about how you're choosing to live right now, in this moment, anxiety and all. He discovered this during the filming of Iron Man, when the pressure to carry a franchise was weighing on him like a ton of bricks. That's when he asked himself a question that changed everything. What if this anxiety isn't about me at all? What if it's about something bigger? He started seeing his struggles not as personal burdens, but as part of a larger story that might help others facing the same demons. Every bout of anxiety became an opportunity to demonstrate resilience, not just for himself, but for everyone watching. Every public appearance became a chance to show others that you can face your fears head-on and still thrive. Your anxiety, he says, is part of your story, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to keep going. He developed what he calls the future memory practice. When anxiety hits, he fast-forwards in his mind to someone else facing the same challenge, someone who might draw strength from knowing how he handled this moment. Suddenly, the anxiety isn't just about him anymore. It's about everyone else who might benefit from his example of facing it with courage and grace. This legacy mindset transforms anxiety from a personal problem into a universal opportunity. It's not about getting rid of the anxiety. It's about using it to carve a path that others might follow. Every time you face your anxiety with courage, he says, you're not just helping yourself. You're leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for someone else who might be lost in the same dark forest. You know, folks often ask Robert, What was the real turning point in his battle with anxiety? They expect some grand moment, some dramatic revelation. But the truth, it was simpler than that. It was the moment he realized that anxiety wasn't his enemy to defeat, but a force to redirect. Just like those ancient Stoics taught, it's not about the cards you're dealt, it's about how you play your hand. Each of these 10 ways we've explored today, they're not just techniques, they're doorways. Doorways to a different way of living with anxiety. From the observer technique that puts you back in the director's chair of your own mind, to the legacy mindset that transforms your struggles into stepping stones for others. Every single one of them has been tested in the fires of real adversity, not just by Robert, but by countless others who've walked this path before you. Now here's what I want you to do. Don't try to implement all 10 at once. That's a recipe for overwhelm, and we've had enough of that, haven't we? Pick one, just one, the one that spoke to you the most as we went through them. Maybe it was the Stoic pause, that space between stimulus and response where all your power lies. Or perhaps it was the Phoenix Protocol, rising higher when anxiety tries to make you shrink. Take that one way and make it yours for the next 7 days. Don't worry about perfection. Remember what Robert says. Perfectionism is just fear wearing a tuxedo. Focus on progress, on showing up, on staying in the ring, even when your knees are shaking. And speaking of showing up, there's something powerful that happens in this community when we share our journeys. Drop a comment below telling us which of these 10 ways you're going to start with. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember, courage isn't about not feeling afraid. It's about feeling the fear and taking action anyway. Next week, we're going to dive into something equally powerful. We'll explore how another modern icon used ancient Stoic principles to build an empire from rock bottom. And trust me, this one's going to challenge everything you think you know about success and anxiety. Until then, remember what Robert Downey Jr. learned in that Burger King parking lot all those years ago. Your lowest moment can become the foundation of your greatest triumph, but only if you're willing to rise up and meet it. This is Rise Stoically, reminding you that anxiety isn't your identity. It's just part of your hero's journey. And like any good hero's journey, the most important part isn't the challenge you face, but who you become in facing it. Stay strong, stay stoic, and I'll see you in the next one.